Hello and welcome to the Inner Courts of the Beautiful. We were looking at the facets of the sun, the various manifestations of Surya. Today we look at one more manifestation of Surya, one more Aditya. The Aditya that we see when sun is in the sign of Cancer, Varunā Adityā, who is also called as Varunā Adityā. Varuna is the lord of the oceans, the seas, the underworld. And in a sense, there is a greater significance to the idea of the underworld or the inner world. Sun, when he is in the fourth house, in Jyotisha, we say that he loses directional strength. And hence, sun is not as bright and visible like the other Adityas that we normally see. But there is a deeper meaning to Varunā Adityā and what his function is. Varunā Adityā is not the sun that shines outside and is obviously resplendent that we see outside. Varunā Adityā is the sun that lights our inner worlds. He makes us look within, and it's not through the eyes that we see outside the outer world. It's when we close our eyes and we see our inner worlds. The light that we see within is Varunā Adityā, and hence he is the one who gives us the power of intuition. Varunā Adityā is the Aditya that also gives us the fruits of our karmas. Varunā Adityā is that Aditya when all the karmas have been performed and the karmas dissolve into Varunā Adityā, and hence he gives us the fruits. The Puranas talk about the various dissolutions of the universe, the pralayas. There are cycles of creation and the cycles of destruction. And when there are cycles of destruction or the pralaya that happens in the phase of inactivity, nature or the universe goes back into the elements. And when they go back into the elements, they go back first into the Jala Tattva or the water element. And Varuna rules the water element. So when creation goes back into the Jala Tattva, we are basically reaping the fruits of all the karmas that have been performed. And that is what Varunā Adityā gives us. And hence, it is not surprising that Varunā Adityā is also the father of Shri or Lakshmi, who is the giver of good fortune. Shri or Lakshmi was born of the sea, and she is hence the daughter of Varunā Adityā. And Shri or Lakshmi gives us the fortune based on one's karmas. The imagery of Varunā Adityā is very special and also infused with a depth of meaning. Varunā Adityā is depicted as one of the Adityas, the sun god with the golden armor. But importantly, he also carries a noose, and the noose is not really just a noose the regular noose made up of rope, but this is a noose that's really a coiled snake. So what Varunā Adityā really does is he drags the souls that have sinned into the cage of clay, which is our body. So he drags souls and he cages them in these bodies, and he rides something like a crocodile, it's something like a porpoise. That's the imagery of Varunā Adityā. Now, what that really means also is that Varunā Adityā, who rules the oceans, the rivers, the waters, also rules creation. All life begins in the oceans, in the Jalatattva, in water. And Cancer, the sign that he belongs to or he rules, is also, it's also the dimension in which life evolves and life emerges from the oceans and the waters. And Varunā Adityā rules that, and he brings the souls to emerge as forms of life. And Varunā Adityā also, because he gives life to all souls and get them to take forms and to have the creation to manifest, he is hence also the knower of the deepest truths of every single soul. He knows the deepest truth of every single soul, and every single moment of dishonesty or lies, if you were to put it that way, he is very aware of that. He knows the deepest secret of every single soul. And hence, he is also one who is not one to let go the soul that has sinned or that has lied. And he does not hesitate to punish such a soul. And hence, it's very interesting that Varunā Adityā is also one of the Dikpalas, the custodians of the directions. And he rules the western direction. The western direction is also governed by the Graha, or the planet of Saturn. The Saturn is again the Graha that teaches you the hardest way. He is the toughest taskmaster, the toughest teacher in the very old-fashioned way. There are no shortcuts, and one has to pay the price and learn the hard way. And hence, Varunā Adityā is the Dikpalaka who does not hesitate to punish. And Varuna hence gives us the due rewards for the karmas that we perform. Like I was mentioning, his daughter is Shri or Lakshmi, and when the rewards are due, one experiences happiness and prosperity. And hence, again, the fourth house, which is the natural fourth house, which is Cancer, is also the house which we call as the Sukha Bhava, or the house that gives us happiness and comforts. It might be a good time to look at some of the case studies to understand how Varunā Adityā works and how he blesses or punishes individuals depending on how Sun is placed in the chart in Cancer in one chart. So Pervez Musharraf is a good example of Sun in Cancer, but where Varunā Adityā's blessings have perhaps rescinded or been eclipsed. Pervez Musharraf, as most of you would know, was the ex-president of Pakistan. He was the 10th president of Pakistan. He was also the former army chief before he was the president of Pakistan. He was a 4-star general. And of course, he was most well known for masterminding and leading the infiltration into India at Kargil. And when things became chaotic and there was a resounding loss to Pakistan, he further went on to stage a coup and replace or rather depose the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, and he took over as the President of Pakistan a couple of years later formally. In 2001 he took over as President. So clearly we see a situation where there's a lot of events that have taken place in a rather clandestine manner. Now, why would that be? Is there something that we get in terms of a clue from Musharraf's chart? Sun is in Cancer in Musharraf's chart, but it is also in the company of Rahu and Jupiter. Now, Jupiter, of course, is good company. However, when we talk about Rahu, this combination of Rahu and Jupiter is what we call as the Guru Chandala Yoga. Those who are interested in Jyotisha would know about this kind of a classic combination between Rahu and Jupiter. The reason it's such a interesting and special and also very important combination to understand is because of the diametrically opposite natures of Rahu and Jupiter. Jupiter stands for all that is right and dharmic and according to traditions and of the highest moral standards, and Rahu is exactly the opposite. It's inverse. It's all about machinations, manipulation, clandestine activity, and behind the scenes work, and shock, the experience of shock, delivering the experience of shock. That's basically what Rahu does. So when you have such a combination, it's called as a Guru Chandala Yoga. Guru, of course, we understand who a guru is: a teacher, a mentor, and so on. In the best sense of the word, showing someone the right path and enlightening a person's path. Rahu, on the other hand, is all that suggests or denotes what is beyond the border. This is both literally and metaphorically. So anything that is that goes beyond the border, which is strange, physically, culturally, psychologically, all of that would be ruled by Rahu. So strangers, alien cultures, alien practices, and so on. So this kind of a combination creates a situation where one can seemingly utter all the right things and seemingly sound like a guru, so to say, but in truth behave like Rahu. So here there is a huge dissonance between the word and deed, and that was something that came about when the Kargil infiltration was masterminded and led by Musharraf. The Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, later went on to say that he was completely in the dark and he never knew that such an attack was infiltration and eventual attack was being planned. In fact, he got to know only when the Indian Prime Minister at that time, Vajpayee, called him and told him about an infiltration having had taken place. So he was absolutely kept in the dark, and that's exactly how this works. Now, how does it all connect with Sun and Cancer? Sun is, of course, there in Cancer. So here you have Sun being eclipsed by this Rahu, because Rahu and Sun, when they combine, is also what we call as a grahana or an eclipse. So here his Sun is actually being eclipsed, and if he was supposed to have the intuition which Varunā Adityā blesses, he was obviously blinded by this kind of a combination. The eclipse of the Sun has happened, so he probably presumed far more than what in reality was the case, and so his judgment was wrong. And he, of course, went on to also take over the power in Pakistan through a coup. Again, it was a clandestine kind of move, behind the scenes kind of action, which led to the fall of the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. So here we clearly see where Sun is in Cancer, but it has quite been eclipsed by Rahu. Of course, then the question comes in terms of Varunā Adityā's punishing, for whatever is not correct, whatever is not dharmic and whatever was not truthfully done. So here we eventually also saw that Pervez Musharraf lost power, and he was charged in court for treason, and in fact there was also a judgment passed by the Lahore High Court where he was sentenced to death. But of course the judgment was later re-looked at, and the judgment was revoked, but he remains still on the run. He is unable to come back to his country, Pakistan, because he still faces the absolute possibility of being arrested and tried again. So for all the machinations of Rahu that was seen in Musharraf's chart, eventually he had to pay the price, and for all the power and glory and prestige that he had when he was the president of Pakistan, now he is pretty much in hiding. So this is a situation where Sun is in Cancer and Varunā Adityā's role or Varunā Adityā's influence is seen, but here it's not quite the blessings, but where Varunā Adityā has chosen to punish the individual. Let's take another case study, this time of Sridevi. Sridevi, as many of you would know, was a very popular Indian actress who pretty much ruled the roost in the 80s and the 90s. She was the highest paid female artist in the Indian movie industry. She was also recognized as the first Indian female superstar in the Indian movie world. So she obviously had a very successful run, and later she was wealthy enough to produce movies and so on. In her case, she also has the blessings of Varunā Adityā. Sun is in Cancer, and Sun is conjoined with Venus in her case. In her case, there is a very interesting kind of a combination that happens by virtue of the Sun and Venus coming together. Sun and Venus, while it is not a very rare combination, one must say, usually gives a great sense of aesthetics and aptitude for the arts, culture, refinement, and so on. But in her case, Venus is actually in exchange with her ascendant Lord Moon, and the ascendant Lord Moon also gets exalted in Taurus. Now, this is of course some insight from the from Jyotisha for those who are interested. Now, when such a kind of an exchange happens between the ascendant Lord and the 11th Lord, obviously she would be someone who would gain even financially from whatever that she was pursuing, from her own personality, her looks. She had a bright look. She was obviously very beautiful. All that comes with this combination of Sun and Venus. And in her case, the ascendant Lord Moon is also exalted. So it's absolutely a combination which would give someone that kind of good looks, but not just the looks, also an inclination to arts, and also an ability to gain financially and also fulfill most of her desires, because 11th house also rules desires. So all of these are the good things. However, in her case, there is also a situation where we have a very unfortunate end to her life. As most of you would know, she had an unfortunate end, and she died in mysterious circumstances, and the official cause was given as drowning in a bathtub. That again connects to Varunā Adityā, because I was talking about Varunā Adityā being the lord of the oceans, the rivers, and the waters. So there is a very interesting thing. They say Varunā Adityā is the one who particularly takes the souls who have drowned in water. So this has a deeper significance, like what I was talking about. Karmas have a dissolution in the element of water, in Jala Tattva. When cycles end, when there's a pralaya, like I was talking about, all of manifestation goes back into water, just like all creation also emerges from water. So, particularly for the souls, because Varunā Adityā is also the one who has got this noose of a coiled snake. So, he is supposed to be someone who takes particularly the souls of those who have drowned back to him. So, that's something that really makes us ponder deeply on what this association with Varunā Adityā is in the life of Sridevi. We have the very intriguing case of Robin Williams. Robin Williams, as many of you know, was a Hollywood actor, one of the finest Hollywood actors, and he is in fact considered as one of the finest comedians perhaps of all time. And his ability to manipulate voices and the voice becoming a very significant part of each of those distinct characters also was a distinct quality of Robin Williams. Robin Williams has this blessing of Varunā Adityā. His sun is in Cancer and conjoined with Mercury. Now, this combination of Sun and Mercury, which we call as Buddha Aditya Yoga, is not a rare one really. It's something that's seen in quite a few horoscopes. However, it's about how powerfully the results are delivered. In his case, it was clearly fully delivered, which is why he had this great intelligence and ability to grasp the nuances of whatever character that he was playing. And of course, he was a very spontaneous stand-up comedian. So his ability to, literally think on his feet was phenomenal. So those are typically the traits of Buddha Aditya Yoga at work. In his case, however, there was a very deep edge to his character, and that came about because of his ascendant Lord Moon going into a very unfortunate kind of a placement with Rahu in the 8th house. Now, that creates a situation where someone with that combination can have a very vivid imagination and almost an exceptional kind of imagination, out of the box thinking, but it also can go to the other extreme of creating a sense of delusion or creating confusion in the minds of people. And usually this kind of a combination of Rahu and Moon combining in the 8th can also create situations where people tend to get addicted to various substances and so on. These were all things that were eventually seen in Robin Williams' life, and that's something that he has been very incredibly transparent and honest about as well, and he's spoken about it. But unfortunately, we had a situation where it did take a toll. It extracted its price, and he eventually ended his life to what was officially called as a diffuse Lewy syndrome, which is essentially about depression. And he succumbed to this eclipse of his moon with Rahu. Now, what we have to see here is the sun, which is Varunā Adityā in his chart, has amply blessed him, which basically reflects in his sparkling talent, a spectacular talent, which is almost borders on genius almost every single time. But the moon was in the eclipse with Rahu, Grahana again. So while the soul, the sun represents the soul is that sparkling soul, and which had the blessings of Varunā Adityā, the moon was eclipsed. So we had the situation where this battle went on, and eventually it was, of course, an unfortunate end in the case of Robin Williams. I'd like to bring this episode to a close with a truly legendary personality, a very interesting personality, Dr. V Raman, Bangalore Venkat Raman. Dr. V Raman was a legendary astrologer, a Vedic astrologer, and Dr. V Raman, he's written many books. He's authored more than 200 books, and many of which are essential reading for every student of Jyotisha. He has given many talks across the world, across Europe, across the US, across Asia, to educational institutions, universities, medical organizations, research institutions, and so on. He also is the very first person to have given a talk on the relevance of astrology in modern times in the United Nations in New York in 1970, where this awareness and recognition of Vedic astrology as some form of a super science was beginning to get noticed, largely due to the work of Dr. V Raman. And Dr. V Raman had a spectacular track record in terms of his predictions. In fact, they are legendary. Dr. V Raman has had a very long run. He predicted from the times of the Second World War. Many events during the Second World War were predicted by him correctly. He correctly again predicted the fates of Hitler, Mussolini, Emperor Hirohito. He predicted correctly again when India would get independence. He predicted about the Chinese invasion of 1962 and the ensuing result. He again predicted Nehru's death. He predicted Vietnam War, the imposition of emergency in India. He also predicted the assassination of Indira Gandhi. So, with this kind of a track record, one would have to think that it just cannot be coincidence that someone can get all of these events absolutely spot on and right. So there is something to the claim of Vedic astrology being a super science, and that's something that was stamped by Dr. V Raman. And we can see in his chart again the blessings of Varunā Adityā in its most resplendent, his inner world being illuminated by Varunā Adityā, and he had that very strong intuition that he pretty much saw everything coming. And there's a very interesting parallel again here. Another modern master in Vedic astrology, Pandit Sanjay Rath, who has also authored many books and considered one of the leading astrologers today in current times, also has the blessings of Varunā Adityā, Sun being in Jaimini again, in Cancer again. So here we again see two masters of Vedic astrology, and both having the blessings of Varunā Adityā. It just goes to show the power that Varunā Adityā has over our inner worlds, and which basically gets manifested in the outer world. I hope you enjoyed this episode on the facets of the sun on Varunā Adityā. Thanks for joining me. I hope to see you next week again.